I'm Mike Vardy.
Meal planning is important because it prevents us from being a disappointed wreck when dinner time comes around and we have no clue what to make, or even if we have the ingredients to make the meal. It's a time and a money saver, but most importantly, it frees up valuable brain space. Creating a meal plan prepares us for the week to come and gives us peace of mind that we're organized and can feed ourselves and our family. That's why I do it, and that's why Plan to Eat helps me do it. Your subscription includes access to the Plan to Eat website and fully featured mobile apps on iOS and Android. And Plan to Eat gives you the tools to clip and organize recipes from any website, the ones your family loves and that fit your dietary preferences and needs. And you can create a meal plan around your schedule. Then what happens is the Plan to Eat software automatically creates an organized shopping list based on your plan. So sign up for your free trial at plantoeat.com/timecrafting. That's plantoeat.com/timecrafting. The coupon will be automatically applied to your account and can be used when you're ready to subscribe. It's valid for new customers only. Give Plan to Eat a try today.
And this is the Productivityist Podcast. Welcome to the Productivityist Podcast. It's me, Mike Vardy, back again this week. And this week I have an amazing guest. But not that any of our other guests aren't amazing, but this woman is pursuing excellence and pursuing amazement, and she is doing so in a powerful manner. That's why it's called The Power of Pursuit with Kelsey Humphreys. Kelsey is a media entrepreneur and motivational journalist. If you've ever watched her show, The Pursuit, she hosts and produces that show. It's a talk show and podcast where she interviews influencers like Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, Brendan Burchard, Barbara Corcoran, and so many more. Just a who's who, a veritable who's who of business and celebrity. It's an amazing show. She also offers simple success tips in written articles for Success Magazine, Entrepreneur Magazine, My Old Stomping Grounds at Lifehack, and the Huffington Post. She's also the author of entrepreneur bestseller Go Solo, a success coach and consultant, and she's a regular conference speaker, and she's an MC too. She does pretty much everything, and you're going to hear how she pursues all of that with vim and vigor in this episode of the podcast. So let's just get to this interview now. Here's my discussion, my conversation with Kelsey Humphreys here on the Productivityist Podcast. Enjoy. All right. I've been pursuing this guest for a while. Actually, it's funny, as we're recording this is, I think, the second time, and it was me that actually had to cancel the last time. But Kelsey Humphreys, thanks for joining me today.
I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
This is awesome to have you on the show. Like I said, I'm talking about pursuit, and that's when I think of pursuit, there's two people I think about. Chris Guillebeau, because he had a book called The Happiness of Pursuit, and you.
Yep.
Why do I think about you when I think about pursuit? Why? Other than maybe the obvious, like it's in front of my, but why is pursuit such a big part of how maybe you're perceived or who you are?
Yeah. Well, I chose that for the name of my show, which is it's a podcast for your listeners, but it's also a YouTube show. It's primarily a YouTube show, I would say, because I travel in person to my guests. And so, I was a solopreneur. I was out there on my own, and I felt like all of the content that I found was just not like people weren't talking about beginner stuff. They weren't talking about the question behind the question. They weren't talking about, okay, but what was it like the first 3 months or the first year, because these guests are so successful. And, we all like kind of read and watch the same people in the influencer success, entrepreneurship space, especially online marketing. And I just felt like, where is the host of the show that is, wants to learn and is asking beginner questions and is not, a lot of times, let's be honest, it's like two multimillionaires sitting there talking to each other, which is very interesting. And I have them all on my show and I follow them all and I love their shows and they're awesome. But it was like, that's not really speaking to me. So I named the show The Pursuit because I'm really trying to help people who are still grinding. Like they are in year 1, they're in year 2, they're in year 3. They haven't made it. They're not, on their 5th online course with their, 6-figure launches and all that stuff. Now we all want to get there. Obviously, I know a lot of my listeners and probably your listeners want to get to that point, but the statistics are that businesses fail in the first couple years, and so I want to help those people to not give up. My mission and vision is to help people become their best selves and give the world their best work. And so the pursuit and the climb and the journey itself is a huge part of that. And so that's why I named my show The Pursuit. But I feel like I have a long way to go to actually have my name and The Pursuit be, almost synonymous, like you were saying, but that makes me happy. I'm glad that that's happening.
No, and I mean, the thing is, one of the things that inspires, I find inspiring is that you are so not only consistent in terms of just delivery, like what you're delivering, but the quality. And it's interesting because I see, like folks like Seth Godin, and I know that actually before we started recording, you said, we mentioned Tim Ferriss, and Tim Ferriss is big on like the quality of what he delivers and stuff like that. But a lot of people misunderstand when his book called The 4-Hour Work Week. A lot of people who aren't in the know are like, oh, what do you mean you can only work 4 hours a week? I'm like, that's not what it means. It means it only feels like you're working 4 hours a week. Same thing with Seth Godin. When Seth Godin says just ship, a lot of people are throwing a lot of, for lack of a better term, crap out there, right? You don't do that. You throw out really and it's not even you throw out, you deliver. You're like, you've got the white glove treatment with what you do. When you set it out to start going solo, which is in your book's called Go Solo, we'll link to that in show notes. But when you set out to do this, how did you map out like this? I don't just want to do this. I want to do it this way.
Yeah. Well, first I want to say, and this is a good lesson in productivity, honestly, this is something I have learned, is that I have so many quality and production issues almost every single episode. I mean, a mic breaks, a light goes out. I mean, I've had episodes where I had tons of unusable footage. I had, people who were out of focus. I had, room mics or like camera mic because my little recorder failed. I mean, so many things. And so I appreciate you saying that in terms of a lot of times I look at it and I see all of the issues we had, like, oh, that lighting could have been better, or
we're always our own worst critic. I mean, when I was doing comedy and stage stuff, people go like, "Oh, that was great," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I missed that line, or I screwed that up, or I could." Even today, when I do talks, the same thing. So we're always going to be harder on ourselves than what others see, for sure.
Yeah, but what I've learned is, obviously, I'm sure you've talked about this a lot with lots of different guests, but perfectionism is going to hold you back from actually shipping and actually being productive. And for me, it was, I have to get this out there. Yes. There's a time, when the whole thing is a little bit out of focus and I had to choose, okay, am I going to just not put this episode out? And I chose to do it anyway because the content was so valuable. I'm like, I can't let basically what comes down to my pride and knowing I'm going to get haters on YouTube. I can't let that stop me from what could be a life-changing nugget of wisdom for someone watching. So that's something I have to overcome over and over and over again is lots of different quality issues. And you were just talking about, my vision at the beginning. I did envision a traveling talk show. That's true. But I had no idea just how much that would be and how many moving parts and all of the stuff. So, but in terms of quality of guests, which is what a lot of people ask me about, I did decide at the beginning that I was going to kind of go celebrity level right off the bat because there's so many podcasts and so many YouTube shows. And so if I really wanted to, kind of pull ahead and set myself apart in such a crowded marketplace, I was like, I need to go after the best. And I knew that I could handle myself on camera. And so also having the video component sets us apart. But what I did that was interesting is that I decided to shoot a pilot with someone locally, which a lot of people would think like start local and just build slowly. But I used that pilot episode, which was with Scott Williams, who he's a local speaker and author, but he has like over 150,000 Twitter followers, and he's verified on Twitter. And so he is very legit, if you will. And so I took that pilot and I immediately started pitching people that were New York Times bestselling authors and, had hundreds of thousands of like almost millions of followers right away, just sending them the pilot episode before we published anything. So I think that kind of shows you that right off right off the bat, I knew I wanted to go for the biggest and best. And then, they had to look at that pilot episode, which by the way was done on a GoPro. It was terrible. It was terrible, but it showed the vision for the show, and it showed me on camera and the types of questions I was going to ask and kind of the vibe. And that was enough. And so Donald Miller is a New York Times bestselling author who said yes right at the bat, and Jeremy Cowart, who's a celebrity photographer. And then after that, things started to snowball really, really fast.
Jeremy's, and both those guys have been at World Domination Summit, Donald Miller and Jeremy Cowart. Jeremy's presentation at the World Domination Summit, I'm going to put it in the show notes because I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen the presentation that he did at World Domination Summit?
I don't. Which topic was it? What was the subject?
It was about. He talked about his brother. One of the things that came up was his brother, and it was all done. So what they did was, and I mean, I'll again, you'll have to watch it, and I'll send you the link too, Kelsey, so you can see it. But the lights came down on him, and his entire talk was animated through his photographs and writing and stuff. Like he built it, and we just watched the screen. It was like watching a short film. But It was so powerful because he's narrating it in the dark, and you could see him looking down at his notes. And it was just, there wasn't a dry eye in the house by the time it was done. Bet. It was really, and he's worked with Michael Hyatt, who I know you've also talked to. Again, Donald did a great talk at WDS. You seem like a person that would be an ideal fit in at the World Domination Summit for sure.
I'm talking with Chris about coming on the show, and when I have him on the show, I might, elbow him about it. Jeremy is definitely a serious creative genius. Genius is thrown around nowadays, but there are only a few guests that I really apply that word to. And he's definitely one of them. So having him come on right off the bat, I mean, that just kind of sets the bar, and so I think for someone who wants to get started with something, if that's your vision, don't be scared about it. Like you just kind of have to go rip the Band-Aid off and just start asking. And that's what I did.
So you started off with the GoPro and Scott Williams, and the pursuit began. Let's talk about who else has been involved along the way. We'll talk about the personal stuff in the bonus episode that Patreon supporters are going to get or have already gotten, depending on when they're listening to this. But I want to talk about bringing people on, delegation, team stuff, because you've got this vision and you're bringing it forward. But when I look at what you've got, I'm like, this Kelsey, she can't be doing it all.
Yeah, I definitely am not. At the beginning, I was using volunteers. So for example, when I went to Nashville to shoot the Donald and Jeremy and Crystal Payne, founder of moneysavingmom.com, when I went there, I had volunteers who helped me. I had my camera and my sister's camera. Now my sister lives in Nashville, which is why I chose that first. Okay. Because I had a free place to stay. I had, someone to drive me around, and I had friends that I knew would go operate cameras and lights and stuff for me. And so that's kind of how it started. And then as it progressed and we had some money coming in, because I started getting, this became all consuming. So there was no more consulting, I was doing marketing consulting before. So as this became all consuming, then I was making money from my speaking gigs, writing gigs. I would do some, motivational coaching and accountability coaching, and helping people grow their personal brands and things like that, which I don't do anymore. But at the time, every single penny of that then of course went back into the show. So then I bought better lights, I bought better audio equipment, and I started to get a specific team in each city. So now I have one guy in New York, and as we grow, he will bring an assistant with him every time. That doesn't happen every time, depending on the budget and who the guest is. And then I have a set person in Nashville. I have a set person in Dallas. I have a set person in LA. And as we add more cities, I'll hopefully add more. So it's like 1 point videographer person. But when I get there, I'm in my flat shoes, and I set up the lights, I set the microphone. I'm helping, it's just me and one other person for the most part. And sometimes I will have an assistant travel with me, or a friend who wants to go because they're obsessed with whoever my guest is at the time. And then they will help me keep track of the time, set timers, give me, show notes, that stuff I don't forget, stuff like that. But that's twice. For the most part, it's just me and my husband has gone with me sometimes, and he'll run the cameras and he'll run the lights. I'm talking bootstrapping from every sense of the word. But now I have an assistant. I eventually hired an assistant. And so she comes to my house twice a week. And then everything else is in the morning, and everything else is remote. And then I have a video editor that came on as, first I just used her once or twice as a freelancer. I was editing everything myself at the beginning. And then I brought her on, and now she will edit every single episode for me. And so now we kind of are getting into a well-oiled machine where myself and my assistant and then my editor, and I also have a couple people who help me with writing from time to time. So now we've got this small little team that's kind of functioning as a well-oiled machine. But that's within the last few months, and we are coming up on 2 years. So most of that time, it was like me.
What's it like when you go into these environments with people? Because I mean, I've done interviews, and most of them are done like we're doing now. Sure, there's been some video, but a lot of them are, they're in the comfort of their home. I'm in the comfort of mine. I know what it's like when you're live doing a live event and being in person with someone. There's just an energy there. Is that? I mean, when you go into, because you're going into, I imagine are you going to a neutral location? Or are you going into their location? Does it vary? And then what is that like in that environment? How does that change the dynamic?
Oh man, it's so different every time. My favorite is to go to them wherever they are, because they're way more relaxed. And there's already, part of why I love in person, and many people were like, Kelsey, don't do it. Do Skype. And I was like, it's not going to be the same, because you just have a different energy and connection with the person face to face.
You also you also stand out because of what you do. I mean,
right.
Look,
Skype is, what I'm doing is different.
It's totally different. I mean, when you see, it was funny. I was talking to my friend Paul Jarvis and Mark Johns. We have coffee. We were all in Victoria. It's really funny. Victoria, BC, the small little city, 3 guys one guy makes his money doing art on the internet. Paul Jarvis, I don't know if you know him very well, but he does really well on the internet. And then the 3 of us are talking, and we're talking about Donald Miller's course, Create Your Life Plan. It's him and the person that he's doing it with at a kitchen table, basically going through it. But there's that intimacy there that you get, which you're not going to get with a split screenshot on Skype. And that's what I really appreciate about what you do.
Yeah, that goes back to the quality. And also remember, my goal is to get these people off script. I want them to tell me real answers. And if I'm in person there, and let's be honest, I'm kind of like this little nobody. And so I just come in and they're already way more relaxed, because it's not like they're sitting down with, Katie Couric or Tim Ferriss, even somebody like that has, they're relaxed. So I love to go to their home or their office. Those have been some of the most fun. But also like with Tony Robbins or a lot of the ones in New York, I'm meeting them on their press tour. So with Tony Robbins, I was in between, I think, Fox News and Bloomberg. Like that was his schedule. And so at that point, I will meet them at his publicist's office or at his hotel room. And so, it's different every time. And it's definitely intimidating and nerve-wracking a little bit, but kind of like a stage performer or any actor or actress. It's kind of like once the camera's on, it's go time. And then all of that fades away.
I bet you didn't have any problem getting Kathy Griffin to go off script.
I did not. But let me tell you something cool about Kathy Griffin is that she prepared notes for my interview.
Wow.
She called a business friend of hers who's a business manager or mogul or something like that, because she knows her business, but she doesn't know the terms. So she called this guy to get, her numbers straight and her terminology, because she knew I was a business and entrepreneurship interview. Isn't that crazy? She's, a massive celebrity, and she prepared notes for me, which I thought was just the coolest thing ever.
As you're telling me that story, it reminds me of Stephen Pressfield's book, Turning Pro. Like that's what pros do. Professionals do that. Whereas, and there's a care factor there that really, you can't fake that. It's, I want to talk a little bit about you being deliberate in these situations. You've got all these different environments, these different people from completely different areas of vocation and stuff like that. How important is it for you, and how important was it for you to establish being deliberate and being, again, consistent and not complacent at all when you go into these things, so that you can, make sure that you deliver the goods time in and time out?
Yeah, well, I think that there are a few sort of like pregame rituals and then set questions. I think a good way to do that is to when you're not in a pressure situation, so maybe on the plane on the way before, or even when I'm just sitting and doing like some strategizing for a quarter or for a year or something, is to remember like, okay, what are my staples here to best serve? Like, how can I best serve? And so I'll always come back to questions like, tell me what it was, or I'll ask them about their average day at the time. And then I try to always go back and say, well, I want to know what your average day was like in your first year, or something like that, that kind of, again, going back to who I'm trying to help and what I'm trying to do, which is, empower and encourage and inspire those people who are about to give up or who think they can never actually quit their day job, those people. And so I think it's kind of having those staples. And then like beforehand, I go over my questions. I don't use questions during the interview. I don't have paper or notes or anything because I will look at it when I don't need to. It's almost like a nervous tick. Like I'll just mess with it, even though I don't need them. So now I've just forced myself to, get rid of the crutches. So I don't use it, but I'll go over my questions ahead of time and I'll think through, okay, what are my top things? Don't forget. And I'll kind of list my top questions. And then I remind myself, this is important, that this is my house, because I'm the interviewer. So like sitting down with somebody like Kathy Griffin, or Larry King. Well, that's not a good example actually, because he's an interviewer. But with Tony Robbins, with Tony Robbins is amazing at what he does and at being Tony Robbins. But I am the interviewer, and this is like my job to go in and interview. And it's my, I get to be in charge of this, even though I'm super intimidated. My mouth is dry and I'm getting all sweaty and like I'm standing in the hall next to his bodyguard, for Pete's sake. I try to remind myself. And then at the end, right before I go in, I just remind myself about the viewer. Like, this is about them and helping people. And so if I totally flub my questions or fall flat on my face, we'll all have a good laugh and it'll be fine.
All right. So I want to dive into your pursuit now, because we've talked a little bit. We've talked about your journey in a lot of ways. Uh-huh. Where do you see yourself, like, as we're approaching 2 years? Mm-hmm. Do you have a plan? Do you have a vision, or is it about just building upon what you've already done and kind of seeing where it takes you?
I have a plan and I have a vision. After I started this, because I was going to just do it, an audio podcast, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do a traveling talk show. And as soon as it started, and this is something everybody knows, like we try and shove down our dreams, right? We kind of like things that are unrealistic over time. We think, because back in college, I was going to be the next like Beyonce. I was going to be a singer-songwriter. That was, the training in my job and all that stuff that I got in college and right after college, that was all just fallback because I was going to be a famous performer. And it turns out I don't like singing in coffee shops and bars, which is what you have to do for like 20 years. And so, I gave up on that dream, but the performer in me is still there. And so as soon as I started, I was like, I love this. I've got to make this bigger, and I've got to make this my full-time thing and make it, make money. And so, my goal was for by 2017 to get sponsorship, which we do have. We've had sponsors signing on for 2017, which is so great. And so now I'm actually making money more than just like what the YouTube money that comes in from the show itself. Like there's a lot of other income streams, but now the show's actually bringing in money, which is awesome. So that was a goal. But overall, I am an entertainer on a mission, maybe would be a good way to put it. So I want to take a version of my show to a network, and network might mean Hulu or Netflix, or it might mean CNBC. TV is changing, which is awesome because that means it's a good time to kind of make it however you can. So I cannot tell you a timeline on that because TV, like I said, is changing and everything's crazy. But my goal is within the next few years to start moving into an actual broadcast situation. I have feelers out for a lot of other things that wouldn't necessarily be taking my show to a network, but it would get me on TV, if you know what I mean? Yep. Which would be kind of a step one or side step. And then I'm writing another book, Success for the Rest of Us, which is kind of like an approachable, doable version of a lot of the success books that people do based on their podcasts. So, Lewis Howes did School of Greatness as a book, and Tim Ferriss just did Tools of the Titans. But the thing I found about a lot, the thing I find about a lot of success content and entrepreneurship content and books especially is that they're so a little bit heavy, and kind of very, very detailed and just a little bit overwhelming. And even like the titles of them, and I'm not just talking about those two books, there's tons of success books, obviously. And so I really want to bring something that people won't get overwhelmed right off the bat. They won't get intimidated by the title. They won't feel like, oh, there's no way I could do this. There's no way I could, master all these tools and master all this stuff. And so that's why I'm going with Success for the Rest of Us, which I just started recently, a new video series on that. They're like 2-minute videos with a success tactic. And so I'm working on my next book, which I am hoping it'll come out at the start of 2018, sort of kind of in the new year batch of books.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. I have a lot of things to get organized before then. So so a new book and then eventually growing my show. If I don't move to a network soon, I would love to have a flagship sponsor that comes on like a Southwest Airlines or Ford or something that kind of fits the traveling show idea.
Yeah, totally.
And almost making it like a branded content piece, but the interview portion would stay the same. So I have tons of ideas on kind of the next few years, but the eventual goal is, I always say, like the Ellen of entrepreneurship and success. So like a little bit more fun, a little bit more laid back, but really amazing interview content for people.
When you mentioned your what your plan was, what your dream was, and I think that's probably why I gravitate towards your content, is I started out doing stand-up and improv comedy. That's what I left my job for to do.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, singing in coffee shops and that for 20 years, with the hope or the aspiration to be not doing that over the long term. The comedic track is no different. Only I think the places are seedier. and the hours and the hours aren't as good, and you're probably not going to get punched in the face for singing a song versus maybe telling a joke that goes awry. But I found that the same path happened for me, and those who've listened to the show before know that I eventually started to bring my comedic stuff to the time management space, and then David Allen said, "Hey, write for me," and all of a sudden I became the very thing I was parodying, and I get to go I get to do this podcast. I get to go and do video. I get to perform. I get to speak. I get to travel. So I get that performance stuff. And you can't bury that. You can't,
exactly.
You know what I mean? You can't, it's funny. I don't know if you've seen the movie Comedian, but Jerry Seinfeld talks about the fact that, everything he sees with a comedic eye. So, when he goes on a plane and sees the razor blade disposal unit in the bathroom, he isn't thinking, oh, well, that's probably because somebody might need to change a blade because they forgot to before they got on the plane. It's no, who is shaving so much that they are going through blades while on a plane? But that's what when you're a performer, and this is my belief, and I know a lot of creative artists, you live and breathe it, and you can't you can quell it a little bit, but you can't turn it off. And if you try to turn it off, then you're miserable. And I got to say, as much as I loved working for Costco, worked there for a dozen years, as soon as what I'm doing now, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And you're right. You can have a map as to what you want to have happen. And you can set plans in motion, but you timelines can be fluid. And I like that idea. Now, before we wrap up, 2 quick questions. What guest surprised you the most out of all the ones you've talked to so far? I wouldn't say it doesn't mean what they said or but you don't even have to say what it was that they did, but which one of them surprised you the most?
Probably Kathy Griffin for the story I just told.
Okay.
That was pretty crazy for her to have note cards for me for our interview. That was just insane and awesome.
When you started out, of the guests you've interviewed so far, which was the one that was on your radar, like almost immediately, that you thought, nope, not going to happen it's going to take me 2-3 years to get that person, but it's already happened?
Tony Robbins for sure. Yeah, Tony Robbins. And when, and I mean, like Larry King wasn't even on my radar because, he's kind of in a different stratosphere of his own. And then I saw him do some other relatively small interview because he was coming up on 60 years. And that was another one where I was like, this is never going to happen, but I might as well pitch it. I might as well send the email. And then they said yes. And next thing I know, I'm in his trophy room in Beverly Hills. I mean, it was insane. So that was another one where I never would have guessed at the beginning that I would have been able to land an interview like that so quickly. It was crazy. There's one thing I want to say about pushing down your dreams. And I don't know how much of my content you dove into, but if you look at like my bios and stuff, eventually somewhere you'll find I'm a recovering high functioning alcoholic. And I think a lot of really creative, really driven, even type A or, high performer type people end up like I did because we're shoving down our hopes and dreams, you guys. Like if you keep shoving down the part of you that you've had since childhood, and somebody right now listening is probably thinking, oh crap, this is me. Like you can't quite get things figured out. You can't quite get the ball rolling. And even once I had gone out on my own and I was doing marketing consulting, I was not nearly as motivated and inspired and productive and disciplined as I am now. I mean, I'm like a completely different person. And that's because I finally decided, like, you know what? I can't shove this down anymore. Somewhere I've got to start performing. I've got to start getting on camera. I've got to start doing this because I feel like this is what I was made to do since I was a kid. So I hope that somebody listening right now who, maybe hasn't been able to get things kind of gelling in their life, I challenge you to go back and look at all the things you've loved your whole life, and you'll probably see it staring you in the face. Not to say you quit your job and go do that, but maybe you start, writing again, or you start taking photos again, or you start playing the piano again, or stuff like that. And you will feel your soul come back alive. And that's kind of a little bit off topic, I guess, on this productivity podcast, but you're not going to be productive and driven and achieve like you can when you are doing what you're meant to be doing. So I hope that helps somebody out there.
No, that doesn't go too far off topic at all because,
okay.
I mean, there are often these barriers that kind of are in there in the way. Mm-hmm. And in order to be more productive, you got to remove them. That's really what it boils down to.
Exactly.
Well, Kelsey, you've come a long way in your pursuit already, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for you. Where can people find your stuff online so they can start to follow you as well?
The best place for the pursuit is to go to the YouTube channel, and it would be awesome if you would subscribe there. And then each month right now, we're putting out a monthly magazine that has a digest of all the episodes because we put 3 to 4 episodes out per month. And so if you get the magazine, it kind of goes behind the scenes and talks through each one a little bit. And so the magazine you can get at thepursuit.tv/magazine. And then the best social media platform for me is Facebook. So I do Facebook Lives, and I usually comment really fast on that one because it's my favorite. So, and I also respond pretty quickly on Twitter as well.
Awesome. Kelsey, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, it was fun being here. Thank you for having me.
That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed chatting with Kelsey. In fact, I really wish that we had more time to chat. We did have more time to chat for our Patreon supporters of the show. And for those who are Patreon supporters, you'll have already heard that bonus episode, depending on when you listen to this episode. But if you want to become a Patreon supporter and get more episodes of the podcast, both solo ones with me where I'm just talking about different productivity practices, tips, hacks, what have you, as well as, bonus content with some of the people I've interviewed on the show, both past and future. You get to hear some people in advance. Then head over to patreon.com/productivityist and pledge anywhere from $1 all the way up to whatever you want. And what that does is help support the show, helps me keep the lights on, helps me get the producer, John Polstra, paid, helps me get the show notes taken care of because we've elevated the show notes as well. It helps me do a lot with the show. And if you can't support the show by going to patreon.com/productivityist, you can't do so in a monetary fashion, then I'd love it if you gave the show a rating or review in iTunes or wherever you are listening to the show. Just doing so helps me make the show better, figure out what I'm doing wrong, what I'm doing right, what I could do better, what you might want me to throw out, what guests you might want to see on, and what format you may want the show to take on. There's so much going on with the show. And if I get ratings and reviews and I can see what I'd like to be able to do with it, then that helps me make the show better. Plus, ratings and reviews help more people find the show. And again, if you want to become a supporter of the show as a Patreon supporter, we have that community, that Slack community that's members only Slack community, so you get involved in conversations there as well. There's lots more ways to get involved with the Productivityist podcast other than just listening to the show, which I'm very glad you did. In fact, I'm also glad that I had my team put together the show notes, my podcast producer, John Polstra, producing the show each and every week. And again, most of all, grateful to you for listening, as well as all of my patrons who support the show month after month after month. If you wanted to learn more about Kelsey, head to the blog where you can look up all the show notes related to the show, or you can just check them out in the podcast listing apparatus that you are using right now. Either way, there's more to discover with Kelsey, and there's more to discover with the Productivityist podcast. I'll be back next week with more of that stuff to discover. Until next time, I am your host, Mike Vardy, host of the Productivityist podcast and founder of Productivityist, reminding you to stop guessing and start going.